Hello everybody, Neck of the Woods here, back with another video, finally. And I'm going to just take a break talking about the reality of Los Angeles, the series that I'm basically going in on LA. In this video, I'm going to introduce to you guys a word that I have probably said a few times in my previous videos, and that is Todd and Steve. Todd and Steve is one of the words that I use outside of YouTube in my personal everyday life when I'm discussing something that somehow may relate to Todd and Steve. So what is Todd and Steve? Todd and Steve range between the ages of 21 on up to about 50 years old. If Todd and Steve is in college, which a lot of them usually end up attending college, then in some cases you can range the age from 18 to 50. There's many different types of Todd and Steves out there. There's different variances, different cliques. A Todd and Steve basically represents a certain class within white men in America. It's usually, the class starts from middle class on up to very rich or very wealthy class. But most of the classes and socio-economic situations you see that Todd and Steve would represent is typically upper middle class, affluent, on up to just basic rich or somewhat wealthy. Todd and Steve works professional jobs, white collar jobs, nice salary jobs. They work in their career that pay them very well. Many times Todd and Steve is given a leg up in life, basically due to the fact that Todd and Steve takes full advantage of the fact that they are white. They benefit from white privilege. They also benefit from white supremacy. That helps a lot for them. Todd and Steve many times come from a family where their mom and dad are married or stayed married for a very long time. Sometimes their parents may have divorced, but both parents play a strong role in Todd and Steve's life. Even if they couldn't work it out, they couldn't make it together in their relationship, they still do everything in the best interest of their sons. Their sons being Todd and Steve. Todd and Steve usually have an inheritance, oftentimes. Many black people don't have an inheritance. We just don't have that kind of situation. And if we do have that situation, us being niggas and coming from a nigga situation, many times we end up getting robbed. This video is not about us though, because I'm talking about Todd and Steve. I was just giving an example. But as far as it relates to Todd and Steve, like I said, everything is done in the best interest of the son or sons, because Todd and Steve's dad believes in leaving something for his son, believe in having a legacy, and he wants, this is Todd and Steve's dad, they want their legacy to prosper and continue the line, the family line of prosperity, success, wealth, and what have you. So they come from an inheritance If something happens to the dad or one of the parents, Todd and Steve is taken care of very well. Some of my subscribers and viewers out there might be like, okay, so who cares about Todd and Steve? I'm not a Todd and Steve. I don't care. I know, I understand, I get that. But as with anything, any word or terminology that I coin, that I use in YouTube, and also in my personal life, I do it. These words that I coined, that I use, that I make up, I use these words in a form of a sort of mockery, sort of ridicule, to a certain degree. When I say Todd and Steve, though, it could be taken or used in any way or aspect or fashion. Some white people could be offended by the terminology Todd and Steve. And if you are, I'm not going to tell you not to be offended. It's one of those words that you could take offense to it or you can laugh at it. It's one of those. It's not really that derogatory. It's just kind of mildly, just a slight, like I'm just kind of making fun of the fact, just the ridiculousness of the fact that a certain sector of white society, of white men, young professional white men, who just, according to me, from my observation, have everything handed to them. Not just because they're white, but that is definitely a big part of it. I find that to be ridiculous. So I have to give it a name, just like I give everything else a name. So that's why I'm talking about Todd and Steve because, as I make these videos, I'm better able to express myself when I just flow with the words, and then you hear me say Todd and Steve or whatever. You already know what I'm saying. You can use this video as a reference, just in case you don't know what Todd and Steve is. I can always refer people or anyone else for future reference to this video when I'm referencing Todd and Steve. Now, this is not just a LA thing. Todd and Steve is all over America. Certain cities probably have a higher prevalence of Todd and Steve than you would in other places. Down south, for example, typically you're not going to find a whole lot of Todd and Steves. There are some exceptions, like Nashville, the city I used to live in. They didn't have a lot of Todd and Steves there, but now Nashville is like one of the big Todd and Steve moving destinations of which a lot of Todd and Steves are moving to. Cities like Nashville, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, probably Denver. Yes, Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Wherever you go, you'll find Todd and Steve. Todd and Steve is very different from a redneck or white trash. Those individuals are not Todd and Steve. Rednecks and Todd and Steves do not click. They do not see eye to eye. They actually look at each other kind of funny. So don't confuse the two. Don't look at Billy Bob. Billy Bob, that's the redneck. That's what I call a redneck. So Billy Bob, he'll see Todd and Steve, and he'll be like, look at that pansy over there. He's just a punk. He's just a weirdo liberal hippie. He needs to be shot. That's what Billy Bob would say. And Todd and Steve, looking at Billy Bob, would be like, hey, bro, look at that pickup truck you're driving. You should be driving a Prius. You should be saving the environment. You driving a gas guzzler. And while they're having that debate, Billy Bob is getting ready to pull out his shotgun and blast Todd and Steve. So please don't confuse the two. Maybe now I've done this before. Like I talked to and I've talked to many white people. I've explained to them this terminology, Todd and Steve, and again, some get offended and some think it's the funniest shit. The ones who get offended more than likely is Todd and Steve. The ones who find it funny as hell is Billy Bob or the redneck or whatever. So that's pretty much it. There's more to Todd and Steve than this. But, yeah, that's what Todd and Steve is. Todd and Steve benefits here in LA because he's able to date any woman he so chooses or desire, for the most part, as a rule. Here in LA, lots of Todd and Steves, they go for Asian girls, and in some cases, a lot of cases too, Latina girls, but mostly Asian girls. And some Todd and Steves date black girls too, the Crystalline Karazins of the world and whatnot. But they're not really into black women like that. They prefer Trisha Takanawa or Ming Yu, the Asian girls, or Sophia, that's the Latina girl. Todd and Steve, you'll find them at Starbucks or Coffee Bean. They usually shop at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. That's where you find Todd and Steve at. They usually drive Priuses or Mini Coopers or Subarus, Volvos, Saabs, the old school Saabs. That's the liberal, quote unquote, liberal environmentalist, green Todd and Steves. Then you got the hipster Todd and Steves. That's the ones who wear the weird clothing from the 50s, the 40s, suspenders, and the really big ass beard, just looking crazy. Then you have the upper class Todd and Steve. They probably don't drive a Prius or a Mini Cooper. They probably drive like a Subaru, maybe even a sports car, convertible, BMW. I mean, we live in LA. A lot of people drive different types of cars, but some people drive flashy cars if they can afford it. Todd and Steve, they just have weird terminologies, sayings that they would say. Like, they start off like every sentence, it seems like, hey bro. They say shit like that. Hey bro, wow, look at that chick over there, she's hot. They say shit like that. That's like their favorite word. When they're like, a black dude will say, oh yeah, man, that girl, she's fine as hell, man, that girl's fine, she's beautiful, she's pretty, or whatever. Todd and Steve, that chick is hot, that girl's hot. That's all they can say. And they're not even saying hot properly. These are white people. They speak English. They supposedly speak proper English, but they don't even know how to say hot. They don't say hot. They say hot. She's so hot. Todd and Steve, like, that's an easy way to identify Todd and Steve. Anytime you pass them by, you see two Todd and Steves. You see, like, a group of Todd and Steves, and wow, she's hot. Like, yeah, that's a Todd and Steve. So that's what a Todd and Steve is. Neck of the woods. Hope you enjoyed the video of my definition of my word that I'm showing you all. Thank you and have a great day.